All right, so if you're like me and policy is kind of your jam, you thought that was really awesome. If you don't think policy is your jam, you might have thought that was boring, but you might be moved by the education piece of this. So I really believe, I tell my students this all the time, I believe in that phrase, knowledge is power. Um, it's a really overused phrase, but I think it's a really important phrase. Although ignorance can sometimes be bliss, right? Sometimes we don't want to know things. The more we know, the more we can act, the more we can do something. And that's how we create change in this world. And I love this quote from Nelson Mandela: education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. And it really guides the next part of this education. So, kind of, the policy piece of it will link to it because it all kind of ties together. But what about education, and how can education help to address this opioid epidemic? And when we talk about opioid education, it's important to know that it's not education simply for the sake of educating. It's educating to truly impact lives and change lives. And there's many ways that we can do this, but that means we're going to have to educate those who are also connected to the opioid epidemic, because we might know some of these things. What about the other people who are involved with the opioid epidemic that might not know? So we can start with an obvious one: prescribers. Education can be formal, right? Conferences, like right now, workshops, which I've kind of tried to make this somewhat workshopy. I'm not hoping we have enough time to get to the workshop piece, or workshops, or it can be informal, like campaigns. We're going to talk about campaigns a little bit more as we continue today. Um, excuse me. I'm going to touch back on the continuing education piece here for prescribers, because prescribers do have continuing education that they're required to obtain. But I want to make sure to mention this very important campaign. I want to make sure to mention this campaign called Choose PT. So hashtag Choose PT. In 2016, physical therapists started this campaign, hashtag Choose PT, to try to educate prescribers that there were alternatives, right? You don't have to prescribe opioids. There are other things that you can do. Don't forget about the value of physical therapy in helping to address pain, right? Rather than opioids. And I thought that was cool. I thought that was a valid way of seeing it. Until I did some research, I hadn't realized that something like this is in existence, right? Something else to consider is that when we think about the importance of this type of campaign and other campaigns that are targeted towards educating prescribers, who are our prescribers? Prescribers can be physicians, nurse practitioners, psychiatrists, veterinarians, which I mentioned earlier, dentists, optometrists. All kinds of people can fall underneath the label of a prescriber. Some states specify which specific prescribers have to follow laws. So, for example, in Kentucky, they actually say optometrists have to follow these laws. Other states might say dentists and physicians. So an optometrist might be like, I don't think I fall underneath either of those. I guess I could be a physician, right? There, it's not as clear. But this is why it's really important to clearly specify who falls underneath an umbrella of these types of laws, because they're going to need to get education, right? We need to make sure that whatever their boards, we have to get continuing education as counselors, boards require prescribers to get particular type of education. So an optometry board, if their law in that state doesn't say that they need to be educated on the opioid crisis in any way, if they're not going to get education on the opioid crisis, right? And so we see I'm not trying to pick on optometrists, but that might be a population that falls through the cracks if that state doesn't specify that they need to have education on the opioid crisis. I hope that makes sense. But also think about not only the who, but what is it that we need to know? Again, prescribers already have continuing education requirements, just like we do. But I'm licensed in Louisiana. We have to have ethics specific requirements. I think most states probably do. Continuing education is needed to maintain your license overall, but we need to make sure that there's something specific to continuing education for prescribers that brings in the opioid epidemic, right? So part of best practices is making sure that they are educated on controlled substances, specifically opioids, treating pain, how to make referrals to treatment, alternatives to it. So this is another way that we see education is really important, and how it needs to be infused within their profession overall. So how are they going to know this information, right? So it's who, what, how. How are they going to know this? You would Well, you might not be surprised because if you're a counselor, you're licensed by a board and you might have looked at other states and seen how much variety there is and what's required. But you'd be surprised, perhaps, about the amount of hours that vary based on the states as far as continuing education in the opioid crisis. I've seen laws where it's as little as 2 hours required. And most of the time, it's every 2 years, similar to, well, for me, my license is every 2 years in Louisiana. I don't want to speak on your states. But 2 hours, that's it on opioid specific prescribing requirements. But then there's some states that it's as many as 40 specific to the opioid epidemic. So there's such a wide variety.